November is fast approaching, and with it, a rematch of the 2020 presidential election. A familiar talking point from 4 years ago has grown even more relevant with time.
Voters are expressing concerns about the age of their choices to run the country.
Age and mental acuity are emerging as key issues in the race for the White House.
It could be a shaky walk across a stage or flubbing a line during a speech. Even the smallest lapse matters when the American presidency is on the line. Joe Biden turns 82 years old this year. Donald Trump, just 4 years his junior, will turn 78. In the political arena, is age really just a number?
It seems to me that more attention should be on, well, what are they going to do as president?
Jen Psaki is a senior reporter for HuffPost. She's based in Washington, D.C., and has covered politics and Congress for nearly 2 decades.
Do we feel safe with them as our leader? Do we feel that they are out for our best interests? Do we feel that they surround themselves with capable, experienced people? It seems like the age factor has taken on a new life of its own that, in my opinion, is not the real issue here. It's more about what are we going to get from these people.
Criticism about aging politicians isn't reserved for our current presidential candidates. The average age of a member in the 118th U.S. Congress is 58 years old, and part of the reason for that is simply because of how the legislative branch works.
There's a seniority system in Congress, for starters. That means the longer you stay, the more seniority you have and the more power you have. So if I come in at 55 years old as a freshman member of Congress, I have to stick around for many terms before I might become a chairman. And if I want to move into leadership, that's another several batch of years. And maybe it's going to take 15 years for me to get up there. By now I'm 70 years old and I'm ready to be the leader if I'm not the majority leader, maybe I'll be the majority whip and I'll be in leadership and I'll wait another 5 years to become the majority leader.
Politician or not, who would want to bow out of anything after putting in time and effort? But that assumes someone can and is doing a job successfully. That's not always the case. Unfortunately,
they represent lots and lots of people and they have a greater responsibility to step out when they're not able to do the job. And they don't, not always.
Take the late senator from California, Dianne Feinstein. She was the oldest sitting U.S. senator when she died in 2023 at 90 years old. Feinstein had a storied career as an advocate for women and the LGBTQ+ community. She took on the CIA to investigate the torture of terrorism suspects. She fought for Californians to have clean, safe water. But in the last months of Feinstein's life, the conversation was less about political accolades and more about her visibly declining health.
In the last several years, it was clear something had shifted with her. She would mix up certain things that were totally different subjects. When you were talking to her, she was due to be the next chairman of the Judiciary Committee. It would have been a historic moment to have a woman chairing the Judiciary Committee. It's a powerful committee. And she was very quietly, politely passed over and was still on the committee, but was passed over for the chairmanship because of the concerns about her mental well-being.
But Feinstein is far from alone in her reluctance to leave Congress. In 2018, Mississippi Senator Thad Cochran announced his retirement after nearly half a century in office. But his stepping down only came after very public scrutiny of his dwindling health at 80 years old. Months before Cochran announced his retirement, Politico reported the senator had confused his yes and no votes on a key issue. He was described as frail and disoriented, at times forgetting where the Senate chamber was located. There's no question that some government officials stay in office past their prime. But how do you fix that? Term limits have become a popular argument.
It's a very popular idea in theory. People look at Congress and see all these old people in there, and I think they were like, let's get change in there.
But it's not as simple or easy a solution as you might think, especially when you consider how our government bodies are structured in the first place.
When you try to impose term limits on lawmakers, that is going to directly clash with the way Congress is set up for people to ascend and move up over time. By the time they reach the height of their work in the chamber, they'll be pushed out. So you won't ever ascend.
The term limit idea also boldly makes the assumption that getting older is directly correlated with declining job performance. And that's simply not the case.
When I think of people like Nancy Pelosi, for example, she's still in the House. She's been in there for decades. And she was smart as a tack, sharp as ever. She is arguably the most effective House Speaker in history, if not in modern history. I mean, she was a master at legislating, at vote counting, at pushing through bills when it looks like they were not going to pass.
Pelosi said as much in a 2021 interview with ABC.
But I'm never bringing a bill to the floor that doesn't have the votes.
So that's an example of when age is not really the issue. It's a matter of, are you good at your job? Are you capable? Are you mentally present?
In early 2024, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell made a surprise announcement that he would leave leadership in November after 17 years as head of the Republican conference.
One of life's most underappreciated talents is to know when it's time to move on to life's next chapter.
McConnell's aides say his announcement had nothing to do with his health. The 82-year-old senator suffered a concussion from a fall in 2023. He's visibly frozen up twice in front of reporters since then. It's almost easy to point to his age and potential health concerns as an argument for him to leave Congress. But that ignores what McConnell has gotten done for his party in the last several years.
He was very effective at redoing the Supreme Court, putting 3 conservative justices on it, when in theory, if he had followed Senate traditions and norms and rules, there would have been 1 conservative justice added under Trump, not 3. But because of Mitch McConnell breaking rules and changing norms and pissing off everybody, now Trump has 3, now we have the court that we have, and now we have Roe versus Wade overturned, and now we have all kinds of things that have gone a very different direction.
Congressman John James recently introduced a resolution to amend the U.S. Constitution so that a person becomes ineligible to serve if, quote, at any time during the term, the person will be 75 years of age or older. But the chance of a constitutional amendment passing are close to 0.
There is some truth, I think, to wanting your leadership to reflect the people that the leader serves. You want to look up to your leader and see someone that you see yourself in some way. I get it, but it's when you conflate those things, I think that's the problem. Just because you're old doesn't mean you're bad or time to retire. It means that maybe you don't see yourself in them, but that doesn't mean that they're bad at their job.
A Pew Research Center study found that 79% of Americans believe in age limits for politicians. But sweeping rules about term or age limits aren't the cure-alls for the issues in U.S. politics. So if voters want a younger government, the means to do so is quite literally in front of them, at the ballot box.
Even if the masses out here, polling shows lots of people want a younger Congress and that there should be age limits. Great, it sounds great on its surface, but when you actually dig into it, it's like, well, let's talk about why that's not going to happen, and also why, if you really are upset about Congress being too old, why it's actually up to you to change it by electing somebody younger.